As part of my 200 follower Twitch special, I decided that I was going to do a blindfolded run of a game. When I set that goal months ago, I saw myself playing Ocarina of Time, a game that I truly feel like I know like the back of my hand. But as we got closer to the goal, I realized there were so many factors that I would have a hard time dealing with if I couldn't see, such as enemy positions, bosses, jumps, doors, etc. I decided that I was going to play a Pokemon game, since they're easy, slower paced, and have some really great sound cues. After having my chat vote in my Discord on which game I was going to run, they selected Pokemon Emerald, and on February 17th, 2024, the run began. This is my journey through Pokemon Emerald's Hoenn region, in a way I've never seen before. Before we go over that, though, I do want to address the elephant in the room. I know that I'm not wearing a blindfold in this video, but I really can't see the game. The very legitimate Game Boy was running on my second monitor, which I had covered up with one of my jackets. So while I can't see the game, I can still see chat. And there were a couple of reasons why I did this. First of all, if I got really stuck, I could lean on my chat to help me out. It would not be fun for you guys or me if I kept running into the same wall over and over and over and over and over again, and believe me, it happened more than a couple of times. I still wanted to do things on my own, but if I needed to get out of a bind, chat was there to help me. Second off, I'm still a very small streamer, and when someone comes into my chat, I want to say hi and make them feel involved. If that means talking with them during the run by debating random subjects or having them help, it's worth it. Lastly, I think I would go crazy if I couldn't see the screen. I know I would get bored in the first 5 minutes if I was by myself, let alone sitting in the dark for 4 hours solely focused on the game noises. It gave me something to do besides listen to the same bonk sound over and over again. I know I'm harping on this point, but I think it's important to let you guys know that I really couldn't see the game. I'm sure the comments have already mentioned that I'm not wearing a blindfold, so I wanted to clear up any confusion. This also wasn't a speed run, but I did want to try to beat this game as quickly as I could. So in general, this run was more about having fun. These runs are still actually going on my Twitch channel, so if you're around on Saturdays around noon central, you can yell at me for faking the run, or just see for yourself. The link for that will be in my description. Anyways, let's get to the run. Going into day one, I was so confident in my ability that I didn't even refresh myself on the game's maps or story. I've played Emerald for what feels like hundreds of times, so I told myself I was going to see how I did on day one and plan a strategy later if needed. But I mean, really, what could possibly go wrong? Oh my. I hopped into the game, chose my character, and just decided to hit random buttons to see what my name was going to be. Somehow, I settled on the name mt.zgh. I think it's a great name, honestly. I'll be referring to him as Mount or Mount ZGH from now on. After Birch talked for what felt like an hour, I was finally able to play the game. Given my confidence with this run, where do you think the first major hurdle was? Maybe it was the first rival battle with May. Maybe it was all the way in Rustboro at Roxanne's gym. Maybe it was going to be all the way near the very end of Juan's gym in Satopolis. Well, it was actually 1 minute into the run when I had to set my clock. I can't tell you guys how frustrating the Pokemon menuing can be when you can't see it. You take for granted when you can see the screen, but when it comes to menu memory, I think that was my biggest challenge. Yes and no are sometimes in different starting spots, so if you want to click yes, you may or may not have to move your cursor. This usually isn't a problem if you can see, but remembering every single instance of this in the game is a Herculean task. Where you are in your bag screen also doesn't change, so you have to remember what slot you're in. I think this can be reset by resetting the game, but I don't really want to be constantly doing that. The biggest problem, though, is that sometimes moving the cursor on an option just doesn't make a sound. Sound was one of the things that I needed to get through this task, and no sound means no certainty. Even if there was a sound on menuing, it's always the same sound, so I can't be certain if I'm on the right option until I click it. If you do a blindfolded run, this is something that you'll just have to get used to or know beforehand. But there are a lot of examples where this can be a problem. But yeah, the clock. I think it was a good 5 minutes to set the clock in my house because of what I mentioned before. Chad had to walk me through the process setting my clock, but we finally got there. This instantly struck a blow to my confidence in the run. Once I knew what time it was, the only option I had left was to continue on. After running into every wall in my house, it was time for me to head to the neighbor's house right next door. Okay, so I'm assuming this is the house in the bottom left-hand corner. Yeah, so the other thing I didn't even consider getting confused about was that I played Leaf Green a bunch of times in my past as well. Since they're both GBA games, I definitely conflated the maps of both games several times. I was under the impression that Emerald's Littleroot town had 4 houses, just like the 4 houses in Leaf Green's Pallet Town. But also, joke's on me, because Pallet Town also doesn't have 4 houses. After researching it, it has 3 houses, but the lab moves from the bottom left to the bottom right. I have no idea how this happened, and I think I confused Pallet Town with Twin Leaf Town from Diamond and Pearl, but I'm honestly more confused than anything. This might be more of a problem later when I have to remember routes in other towns, but since it's so small, I was going to get to my destination eventually in this town. After talking with May, I headed out to find Professor Birch and pick my starter. I had chat vote on my starter, and they decided on Trico, which honestly was a great choice. Trico was going to be great early on against Roxanne, and was going to be super strong against the many water types of Hoenn. We beat the Poochyena. It's a Zigzagoon? It is a Zigzagoon. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I forgot to mention that as a Zelda player, I've learned to tune out most sounds, and I guess that extends to Pokemon cries. I figured I knew most of the Mons by their cries, but this run showed me that I do not. Once I knew each Mon by their cry, it was going to be a great tool to make sure that I can play this game with type effectiveness in mind. Birch took me back to the lab, and I nicknamed my Pokemon. It's very interesting. This is a lot of imagination. There's a lot of imagination going on. Oh, I'm naming him. That's what's going on. Okay. What do we want to name him, chat? And I will try to name him as best as I can. I stopped the naming process, didn't I? Oops. Nicknaming was going to be fun later. After our chat, it was time to head to Oldale Town in the north. I carefully made my way up the winding route, and after forgetting if I needed to get the running shoes for my mom and jumping off the ledge one time, I made it. Since I had been through a couple battles, I figured it was time to heal up, so I began to look for the Pokemon Center, which I was lucky enough to find quickly. This time, at least. A was healed and ready for the fight with May in the route just north of Oldale. I encountered several Pokemon on my way there, and I discovered 2 more interesting conundrums. The first was that I had no idea how my Pokemon were doing most of the time. Until I was at Red Bar, I had no idea what his health was at, and unless I remembered his level and PP count, I might be going up against some things that I was not going to be prepared for. I also didn't know what level or health my opponent's Pokemon were at, so they could be half health, quarter health, or really anywhere but full health. And I wouldn't know for sure unless Chad told me. They could also just stomp me if I wasn't careful, so every battle was going to take a little bit more skill and focus than I was expecting. The second thing that I realized is that characters that are not on walls are going to be super hard to find. May was really the first of many of these problem characters, since she's not on the wall of trees in the north, but rather a row right beneath it. Up until this point, I was hugging the walls and praying that I ran into people or buildings that I needed to in order to progress. But now, I had to find people using what felt like luck, as I could only rely on the walls so much to get me to where I needed to be. The other thing that I was starting to understand was that this game has a weird step system. If you press the D-pad where you want to go, you have 2 outcomes. First, You walk in that direction, and this usually happens when you hold the D-pad down in a different direction. Alternatively, you can do a turn where you don't actually move, and this usually results from tapping the D-pad down instead of holding it. This system makes sense because maybe you want to turn to grab an item or talk to someone without actually walking, so it usually works as intended. But in a run where I can't see and play more gingerly so I don't step more times than I want to, I turned a lot, and that became a problem when finding May. Even with these problems though, whether it was luck or skill, we found her. We battled her, and... Oh, that did not heal us a lot. We lost. After being sent back to the Pokemon Center in Oldale, I decided to take the opportunity to make the run a little bit more consistent. In blindfolded runs, there's this concept known as normalizing, where you find a way to consistently perform an action whether you can see or not. This can be using sound cues to time punches and punch out, or using the camera position in Mario 64 to get stars more consistently. If you don't use these strategies, you'll basically just be fumbling around until you stumble upon your goal, or give up. I've kind of been doing this as I use the sounds of bumping into a wall to get me into corners so I can remember where I am in town and then just go from there. But I decided since I was in front of the PC, I was going to find a consistent way of getting back there in case I didn't white out. I decided that for this specific normalization strategy, I would use the difference between the root music and the town music to figure out where I was. Straight down, to the right a little bit. So it's 3 from the root exit? 1, 2, 3. Yes! I moved to the bottom of the screen until I heard either the root music or bumped into a wall. In this case, when I heard the bump, I counted my steps to the right and moved down after every single step. If I bumped again, I would continue right once again until finally I didn't bump and made it to the root. From there, I made sure I was flush against the leftmost wall, slowly walked up until I heard the music change, moved left to see if I needed to move up one more square, and then recounted my steps to get back to the PC. I found the strategy worked, and moving 2 squares left and heading straight up worked consistently, so long as I didn't just turn. This was the first of many normalizations in my arsenal, and I repeated the same steps with the Mart. And how did I lose that so badly? Yeah, it didn't work so well. I decided to just go fight May and deal with this later so that I can make some progress today. I made it back to May once again and had much more health due to using Absorb on the way there. After several pounds on her Torchic and several scratches and growls to my Trico, I actually won. And it felt... Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. It's so brutal. Y'all have no idea. I headed south from my spot and managed to make it all the way back to the town and passed it to the root. I used the new strat that I developed to get to the PC, and it worked. Once I got to the right spot, at least. With healed, I attempted to normalize the Mart route, which I actually managed to find. 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh my god, that worked. After I knew how to get to the Mart, I headed back home and saw my mom by accident, before heading to the professor to get my Pokedex and my Pokeballs. I then purposefully saw my mom and headed back to Oldale to continue my adventure. I finally had my first trainer battle that wasn't May. I think that's a Wurmple. And we won with relative ease. We also somehow caught our first party member, a Zigzagoon we named... I wanted to nickname him. We'll get it next time. We also caught a Ralts, who we nicknamed R. Okay, so it would be... R. And then... So 2,
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I think the number pad is to the right. So I'm gonna assume that it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if I go 1, up 1, right 1. We're clicking that. And there he is. That's our Ralts.
We'll get it one day. Finally, we made it to Petalburg. But I am so dumb that I thought that we were in Rustboro and not Petalburg. This was definitely my mistake, and it made this section way longer than it should have been. I tried to normalize the area, but I wasn't really able to succeed this time because I thought we were somewhere else. But I actually went to the gym by accident, and thinking it was Roxy's gym, it took me like 5 minutes to figure out where I was. Until chat told me that I was being dumb, I would not have talked to my dad and continued the story. Wally caught his Ralts, and I decided that I needed to GTFO out of this town from sheer embarrassment. I continued west and headed up to the forest, without much incident, honestly. There were a couple of trainer battles and a Team Aqua battle, but other than that, I made it through there relatively quickly. Outside of the forest was a different matter. I knew the route that I was in. I literally envisioned it and told chat about it.
So this one, if I recall correctly, which I might not. Oh, this is like, there's like a berry shop to my left. And then I go right, and then there's a bridge up, and then left, and then there's another bridge up, and then that takes me to Rustboro.
But I got caught on walls and trainers, and I ended up getting really stuck. I did encounter a wild Talo, one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, which I nicknamed Pikachu.
It'll be 7 across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and down 1. What?
What?
I can't nickname a single Pokemon.
I give up at this point. Chat bailed me out, and finally, after 3 hours and some more trainer battles, I made it to Rustboro City. Now, I thought I knew Rustboro City way better than I actually do. I was under the impression that the mart and the gym were dead ahead and the PC was more to the west. So I started looking for the PC. I got caught on fences, houses, people, and all manner of things, and even made it to the gym by mistake.
Poke Center.
And while I got close...
Why are you bonking me? Am I close?
Chat bailed me out again. I wanted to be done with the game for the day, so I headed for the gym. Somehow, we made it into the gym after counting steps from my initial visit.
Is this it? Oh my god. That actually worked.
And blasted my way through this gym. I eventually got to Roxy after running into many walls and getting into all the trainer battles. So, I challenged her. I went in with an injured level 7 Ralts, because I thought that he could handle it, but...
That was instant.
This isn't a Nuzlocke, so he'll be fine, but it stinks that he couldn't get the experience. Just to be safe, I sent in, and he just started using Absorb. And, well, it was a bit anticlimactic, but it worked, and Roxy was taken down. Roxy forfeit the stone badge. Also tried to evolve, but I held off for now and decided to end day 1 of my stream. I signed off, and I got my brain thinking about new strats.
But 3.5 hours later, we finally beat Roxy. And I think what that tells me is that I'm going to need to rethink some strategies. I'm going to have to think some strategies over of just like, I need to look at some of the other maps just so I can remember what they look like and that I know where I'm going. And I need to kind of figure out what is the best way to learn how to figure out where I am in this, like in each of the towns.
And yeah, that was the start of my Blindfolded Emerald experience. But there are more episodes of this to come. By the time this video gets out, I think I'll be on part 4 of this adventure, so come stop by and say hi if you liked what you saw, and maybe drop a like and a sub on the YouTube. I do this run every Saturday from about noon to 3 or 4 p.m. Central, and I do some other things throughout the week too. I'll try to get this series out every week, but I will say I'm not the best at video creation yet. Anyway, I hope to see you guys later. Ciao ciao for now, and have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching.